Good morning. It's nice to be back with you. This is The Point. And today I want to talk to you about listening. I remember as a child, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote a poem about Paul Revere. And he started his poem by saying, "Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere." Now, many times in my career as a teacher, I would say to my boys and girls, "Listen, my children." And I would read to them, and they would love to be read to. I read to my grandsons when they were very young. I read to my own children when they were young, and I think all moms and dads should read to their children as often as they can, because they learn things by listening, and they begin to understand how carefully they have to attend in order to listen. I even read to my students that were older. Many times we would enjoy a very emotional novel about something that might cause some tears. And that led to the opportunity for us to talk about the fact that, yeah, sometimes even boys have tears. It's okay to show your emotion. Listening is something that we need to practice. Oftentimes, when we're thinking about listening, we have the intent of getting some information. And I just had the opportunity to give some information and directions over the phone. And so when I was doing that on how to thread a sewing machine, the person who was listening had to listen intently, and the person who was telling her how to do something was having to listen very intently. The details were pretty significant, and because both of us were intently listening to the feedback from the other person, we were able to thread the sewing machine without any incident. Sometimes when we listen for understanding. We listen to learn something or to take in a point of view. And when we do that kind of listening, we sometimes take notes because that's what we need to do to attend to what we're hearing. Listening is something that is a learned idea, a learned trait, I should say. Some of our students fare very well in school, especially back a few years when the major way that students were taught was by teachers talking, teachers giving the facts, teachers telling you what's important, teachers telling you what you needed to remember. That language that was given to you was the essence of your education. And our students who had the central tendency to be auditory did very well in that situation. They listened intently and they learned because they were listening. However, that's only one of our modalities. We also have people who are visually, they learn by vision. They visually learn things. They have to see it in order to understand it or to get it, if you will. And then there are other people who have to touch it. They have to get right in there and muck around in it before they can understand what they're learning. We went through a time in education when we realized that those three modalities were present in all of us, and that if we would work on it and offer the opportunity for kids to not only listen, but see visually and touch physically, we had a more balanced learner. And so our schools have changed in that respect. And the auditory learner is not the only one that can be successful in today's classroom. One of the things that I have learned in my time as a parent and a teacher is that I'm a person who likes to fix things. I'm an enabler, I'm a nurturer, and I really care about people. And when I'm told something, I listen with the intent that maybe I can make a difference. Well, I don't doubt that that's something that I can do, but that's not always what listeners are wanting. Sometimes people just want to vent. They just want you to hear their point of view or to think about what they're thinking. And they just are talking to you and wanting you to listen so that you can hear what they have to say. Sometimes, however, when someone's telling you something that's important, that's critical, that's hurtful, or that's joyous, they might want you to listen with the intent of maybe giving them some advice or asking you your opinion about something. It's always good to preface those kinds of listening sessions with some questions as the listener. Now, I'm happy to listen to what you have to say. Are you asking me for some advice when you have told me what you're going to tell me? Or do you just want me to listen and not tell you how to do something or not give you advice? I had this experience with someone very close to me, and it was through some therapy that we learned that when I would listen and when I would hear, and when I immediately gave feedback or how to fix it or have you thought about or why don't you do, the message to the listener at that point was, I'm not good enough. I'm making all these horrible mistakes. And she's judging me and she's thinking that I don't have the capability, which in reality was not my intent at all. But rather, I needed to listen, and then if the person that was talking to me wanted my advice or they wanted my suggestion, they could ask for it, or they could tell me that up front before we began the conversation. These kinds of intuitive realities are not a natural thing. We are anxious to engage with other people and listen to what they have to say. And out of no meaning of being critical, we want to make suggestions, or we want to share what we would do or what you could try. And it's not because we're judging, but it comes across that way. And so one of the things that we can do as listeners is make sure that we understand the intent of the speaker. And we honor that intent. If they just want to vent, then just let them vent. Let them share with you what they think, what they're feeling, and listen with the intent of paying attention and making them feel important. I guess what I really want you to understand is that sometimes listening can be quite judgmental, and it shouldn't be that way. We aren't meant to listen to someone and then immediately judge whether they're right or wrong in our opinion and give it right back at them. That's not always the reason that we listen to people. I want to talk to you about something that has come up in my life and that I've really been thinking about. I like to study in genealogy. And yes, I'm 78 years old and I have a different opinion about listening today than I did when I was young. However, I want to encourage you as a young person or a younger person to take an opportunity that I didn't take. And now that I am the age that I am and I'm ready to reflect on my life, there are many things that I wish I would have asked. I was the daughter of two educators, and so that was back in the day when we didn't have daycare, and I spent a lot of time with my maternal grandparents. I learned a lot from my grandma Osa. She was a remarkable woman. She did a lot of things. She was very kind, and she had a lot of information she could have shared with me. But I didn't think about asking the questions. I did a lot of things with Grandma. I remember some of the things that she told me that I listened to, I really learned about, and it stuck with me. The reason today that I don't like ditch lilies that grow in the ditch, those pretty orange ditch lilies, is because when I would go out in the garden with my grandmother, she had a garden out in a field that was probably, maybe a football length and about that wide. And we would garden, and she would hoe, and she would pull weeds, and I'd be out there with her. And there were blue racers in the garden, and they're a very non-hurtful snake, but they race around the ground, and they're very frightening, and I hated them. And Grandma would always say to me, well, you just stay out of the ditch lilies. That's where they like to be. Stay out of the ditch lilies. So to this day, I don't like ditch lilies because they remind me of blue racers, and I really don't like snakes. When I would stay with my grandmother, I would get to do things that I really benefited me as I grew up. I learned to watch her bake cookies and bake food and create dinners for all of the workers that would come and help my grandfather harvest on the farm. And I'd watch Grandma peel potato after potato after potato and cook them up and serve them and receive all the accolades from those other farmers for what a great meal she prepared. I remember laying on the carpet in their living area, and my grandfather and I would sit in front of the radio. He'd sit in his rocking chair, and I'd lay on the floor, and we'd listen to the Detroit Tigers play baseball, which has made an impact on my life. I love baseball. I like to listen to it. And having a radio was something that at that time was the way that we listened.